I'm Sienna, and I'm 28. My husband just tried to steal my entire inheritance, but he had no idea I'd find out through his broken phone. The same phone he'd carelessly abandoned in our kitchen drawer for about 6 weeks. The screen shattered like our marriage was about to be. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to how this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and I was rushing around our Manhattan penthouse like a woman possessed. I had 3 board meetings scheduled, 2 conference calls with our West Coast distributors, and a presentation that could secure the biggest client in my company's history. My father's marketing empire, which I'd inherited at 25 when he passed, was finally hitting the stride he'd always envisioned. I was grabbing files from my home office when I realized my phone wasn't in my purse. Panic set in immediately. My entire business lived on that device. Client contacts, presentation slides, authorization codes for million-dollar transfers, everything. Then it hit me. Yesterday's flight from Chicago. I'd been so exhausted after closing the Henderson deal that I'd probably left it in the seat pocket. Classic rookie mistake from someone who usually had her life organized down to the minute. "Honey, have you seen my phone?" I called out to Marcus, but he'd already left for his office. My husband of 3 years ran what he called a boutique investment firm, though I'd started noticing he was always stressed about cash flow lately. Still, when you're managing other people's money, stress comes with the territory. That's when I remembered the broken iPhone sitting in our kitchen drawer. Marcus had cracked the screen about 6 weeks ago during one of his frustrated moments after a difficult client call. He'd immediately bought a replacement and tossed the damaged one into what he called his electronic graveyard in our junk drawer. I pulled it out, examining the spiderweb of cracks across the screen. The phone still powered on, but using it was like looking through shattered glass. Still, desperate times and all that. My first thought was to take it to the Apple store, but the nearest location was across town, and I had exactly 40 minutes before my first meeting. Then I remembered Tony, the electronics repair guy who worked out of a small shop 3 blocks from our building. He'd fixed my laptop once, fast and cheap. Perfect. I grabbed my keys and practically sprinted to his shop. The bell above the door chimed as I rushed in, probably looking like the frazzled businesswoman I was. "Tony, I need a miracle," I said, placing the phone on his counter. "Can you fix this today? I lost my regular phone and have meetings all day." Tony examined the damage, tilting the device under his desk lamp. He was probably in his 40s, the kind of guy who could fix anything electronic, but looked like he'd rather be working on vintage radios. "Screen replacement, yeah. I can have this ready in about 3 hours if I bump you ahead of my other jobs. You're a lifesaver. What do you need from me?" "Just need to test all the functions after the repair to make sure everything works properly." "Perfect, thanks." Marcus had never been security conscious with his devices. No passwords, no locks. Why would he be? I was his wife, and he supposedly had nothing to hide. "I'll text your regular number when it's ready," Tony said, writing up a quick receipt. I thanked him and rushed back to handle my day. The board meeting went well, the conference calls were productive, and by 3 o'clock I was feeling like I'd successfully navigated a potential disaster. That's when Tony texted. "Your phone's ready, but you need to come in. There's something we need to discuss." Something about his tone, even in text form, made my stomach clench. I hurried back to his shop, finding Tony looking visibly uncomfortable behind his counter. "Mrs. Richardson, I need to tell you something, and I'm not really sure how to say this." He kept looking at the phone in his hands like it might explode. When I was testing the functions after replacing the screen, I noticed some messages that... He paused, clearly struggling. "Look, I'm not in the habit of reading people's private stuff. I just tap around to make sure everything's working. But there were some text conversations that I couldn't help but see, and I think you need to know about them." My heart started racing. What kind of conversations? Tony handed me the phone, now with its crisp new screen. I took screenshots. I know I probably shouldn't have, but something told me you'd want proof. He showed me his own phone. The screenshots made my blood run ice cold. Text from business partner Rachel. "The account transfer is scheduled for December 15th. Once the money moves offshore, she'll never trace it." Marcus's response, "Perfect. By the time Sienna realizes what happened, we'll be in the Cayman Islands. She trusts me completely. Never even looks at the financial statements." Another message from Rachel. "What if she gets suspicious?" Marcus. "She won't. I've been slowly draining smaller amounts for months. She's too busy playing CEO to notice. Besides, her accountant thinks I'm handling our joint finances. This will be the biggest payday either of us has ever seen." I felt like I might throw up right there in Tony's shop, The room seemed to tilt sideways as I processed what I was seeing. "Ma'am," Tony said gently, "you need to cancel your credit cards and change all your passwords. Tonight. Whatever this guy's planning, it's happening soon." I stood there in Tony's shop, staring at my husband's phone with its shiny new screen, feeling like I was looking at evidence from someone else's life. This couldn't be real. Marcus, the man who brought me coffee in bed every morning, who'd held me while I cried after my father's funeral, who'd sworn to protect my family's legacy, was planning to steal everything. "How many screenshots did you take?" I asked Tony, my voice surprisingly steady. "About 12. Different conversations going back several weeks." Tony pulled up his phone again. "There's more. Stuff about moving money into accounts she can't access. Discussions about timing it with some business trip you're apparently taking next month." I scrolled through the images on his phone. Each one felt like a knife twist. "Rachel, the lawyer says once the transfer completes, marital asset laws won't matter. She can't touch money in our Cayman Corporation." "Marcus, Sienna thinks I'm just bad with money. She has no idea how much I've already moved. Her father left her everything, but she's about to learn what real betrayal feels like." The casual cruelty in his words took my breath away. This wasn't just theft. It was a systematic destruction of everything my father had built, everything I'd worked to honor and grow. "Mrs. Richardson, are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" Tony guided me to the small chair behind his counter. I realized I'd been holding my breath. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Based on what I saw, at least 3 months of serious planning. But there were references to smaller transfers going back longer. Tony hesitated. "There's something else. This Rachel person, she mentioned meeting him at some restaurant called Meridian tonight. Something about finalizing paperwork." My mind went into overdrive. Meridian was an upscale place downtown where Marcus sometimes took clients. If they were meeting tonight, that meant the plan was accelerating. "I need copies of everything," I said, standing up with new determination. "Can you send the screenshots to my email?" "Already did while you were reading." "Check your inbox." I pulled out my backup phone, a simple device I kept for emergencies. The screenshots were there, along with Tony's note. "Get a lawyer immediately. This looks federal-level serious." Walking back to our building, I felt like I was moving through water. Everything looked the same but felt completely different. The doorman who'd known me for 3 years, the marble lobby I'd picked out myself, the elevator that led to what I'd thought was my sanctuary. Inside our penthouse, I stood in the living room we'd decorated together, looking at wedding photos where Marcus smiled at me with what I'd thought was love, but now recognized as calculation. Had any of it been real? My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Running late tonight, don't wait up. Big client dinner could go past midnight." The lie came so easily to him. I wondered how many other client dinners had actually been planning sessions to rob me blind. I opened my laptop and started researching. Cayman Islands banking laws, asset protection and international transfers, marriage fraud statutes. The deeper I dug, the more I understood the sophistication of their plan. They weren't just stealing money. They were creating a legal maze that would take years to untangle if I could untangle it at all. Marcus had been studying my business, my habits, my trust in him, and weaponizing all of it against me. Around 6 o'clock, I heard his key in the lock. I quickly closed the laptop and grabbed a magazine, trying to look like the oblivious wife he expected me to be. "Hey, beautiful," Marcus said, kissing my cheek with the same lips that had been planning my destruction. "How was your day?" "Productive." Fixed the phone situation. I held up the repaired iPhone, watching his face carefully. For just a second, his smile faltered. "Oh, good. Any issues with it?" "None at all. Works perfectly now." I kept my voice light, casual. The repair guy was really thorough. Marcus nodded, but I caught him glancing at the phone again. "I should shower before dinner. This client meeting might run really late." "Of course. Important client?" "Very. Could change everything for the firm?" The irony in his words was almost too much to bear. As he headed upstairs, I quietly opened the screenshots again. There was one I'd missed before. "Rachel, what if she finds out before we're ready?" "Marcus. Then we accelerate everything, but Sienna's not suspicious. She thinks I'm just struggling with the business. She actually feels sorry for me." He'd played me like a violin. Every stressed conversation about his firm's cash flow, every time I'd offered to help with his expenses, every moment of concern I'd shown for his financial worries had been part of his act. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the woman whose father had built an empire through paranoia, preparation, and never trusting anyone completely. Time to show him exactly how much my father had taught me. That night, I lay in bed listening to Marcus breathe beside me, wondering how long he'd been planning this betrayal while sharing our most intimate moments. His phone buzzed softly around 1 a.m. He grabbed it quickly, clearly trying not to wake me. I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed, but through my lashes I could see him typing. Another piece of his conspiracy, happening right next to me in our marriage bed. When I was certain he was asleep, I slipped out to my home office and started making calls. First to Janet, my company's head of security, who had connections I'd inherited along with the business. Janet, I need a favor and I can't explain why right now. Can you recommend someone who specializes in financial forensics? Someone discreet. Sienna, it's 2 a.m. Are you in some kind of trouble? Potentially serious trouble. I need someone who can trace money transfers and international banking activity. Tonight. Janet was silent for a moment. I know someone. Former FBI Financial Crimes Unit. He'll charge premium rates for emergency work, but he's the best. His name is David Chen. Send me his number, and Janet, not a word to anyone, including my board of directors. Understood. David Chen answered on the third ring, sounding surprisingly alert for the middle of the night. Ms. Richardson, Janet filled me in on the urgency. What do you need? I need to know if someone has been moving money out of my accounts without my knowledge. And I need to understand what legal protections I have if they're planning something bigger. I'll need account access and authorization to run forensic traces. How soon can you meet? Tomorrow morning, but I need this completely confidential. Understood. Bring all your financial statements, passwords, and any evidence you have of suspicious activity. After hanging up, I spent the next 3 hours going through every financial document Marcus had access to. Joint accounts, business transfers, investment portfolios, creating a complete picture of our financial relationship. What I found chilled me to the bone. Small transfers I'd never noticed. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, always just below the threshold that would trigger automatic notifications. Marcus had been bleeding money from our joint accounts for months, so gradually I'd never questioned the balance fluctuations. The morning came too quickly. Marcus made coffee and kissed my forehead before leaving for what he claimed was an early client breakfast. I watched from our window as he got into a cab, then immediately called David Chen. We met at a small office building in Midtown. David was exactly what I'd expected from former FBI. Methodical, direct, and reassuring in his competence. Show me everything, he said without preamble. I laid out the screenshots, financial statements, and my timeline of suspicious behavior. David studied each document with the focused intensity of someone who'd built a career catching financial criminals. Mrs. Richardson, you're looking at sophisticated fraud. This isn't amateur hour. Your husband has been systematically positioning assets for a major transfer. He pointed to several transactions I'd missed. These smaller amounts weren't random. They were test runs, making sure he could move money without triggering security alerts. How much are we talking about? David pulled up his laptop and started running numbers. Based on your account balances and the pattern I'm seeing, I'd estimate he's already moved approximately $200,000. But that's just preparation for the main event. My stomach dropped. The main event? Your inheritance accounts, your business holdings, the trust funds your father established. If they succeed with this Cayman transfer, they could potentially access everything. We're talking about tens of millions. The number hit me like a physical blow. My father's entire life's work, the security he'd built for my future, the company that employed hundreds of people, all of it at risk because I'd trusted the wrong man. What are my options? Legally, we need to move fast. I recommend freezing all joint accounts immediately and changing access to anything he could potentially reach. We also need to document everything for potential criminal charges. Criminal charges? Mrs. Richardson, this isn't just divorce court material. We're looking at wire fraud, potentially RICO violations if this business partner is involved in other schemes. Your husband could be facing serious federal prison time. I thought about Marcus making coffee that morning, kissing my forehead, lying to my face about his breakfast meeting. The casual sociopathy of it all made me furious in a way I'd never experienced before. How long before they could execute this major transfer? David checked the screenshots again. Based on their timeline, you have maybe 2 weeks, possibly less if they get spooked. Then we need to spook them first. Have you ever experienced that moment when you realize someone you love has been playing a completely different game than you thought? Drop a comment below if you've ever had your trust shattered by someone close to you. David smiled grimly. I like the way you think. What did you have in mind? By noon, David and I had transformed my financial life into a fortress. Every account Marcus could access was frozen. Every password was changed. Every automatic transfer was suspended. If he tried to move so much as a penny, alarms would sound from 3 different monitoring systems. He'll notice something's wrong by tonight, David warned as we finished the paperwork. Joint account holders get immediate notification when accounts are restricted. Good. Let him sweat. But I had more than defensive moves planned. My father hadn't built his empire by playing defense. He'd taught me that when someone declares war on you, you don't just protect yourself. You make sure they regret their declaration. I called my corporate lawyer, Patricia Williams, who'd known my family since I was 12. Patricia, I need an emergency consultation, something that requires absolute confidentiality. Of course, Sienna. How emergency are we talking? Meet me in 1 hour. Bring everything you know about asset protection and fraud prosecution. Patricia's office overlooked Central Park, a view my father had always admired when he'd bring me to meetings as a teenager. She listened without interruption as I laid out Marcus's scheme, her expression growing darker with each detail. This is extensive fraud, Sienna, but it's also an opportunity. What do you mean? Your husband has documented his criminal intent extensively. These text messages are a prosecutor's dream. We can use this evidence not just to protect your assets, but to ensure he faces full legal consequences. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force. This level of international money movement with criminal intent gets their attention quickly. While she made the call, I started planning my next moves. Marcus would realize something was wrong when he tried to access our accounts this evening. He'd probably panic, maybe try to accelerate his timeline. I needed to be 3 steps ahead of his reactions. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Client lunch running long. Might grab dinner downtown too. Don't wait up again. Another lie. I quickly forwarded the message to David with a note. Track his location if possible. I don't think he's where he claims to be. Patricia finished her call. FBI wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. They're very interested in this case. International wire fraud involving this kind of money gets federal attention. What happens to Marcus? If convicted, he's looking at significant prison time. Wire fraud alone can carry up to 20 years. Add in conspiracy charges if this business partner is part of a larger scheme, and we're talking about a life-changing sentence. I thought about our wedding day. How Marcus had sworn to love and protect me. How he'd cried when my father died, held me through my grief, promised we'd build something beautiful together. Had any of it been real, or was it all just a long con to get access to my inheritance? Around 4 o'clock, David called with an update. Your husband isn't at any restaurant downtown. His credit card was used at an office building in the financial district, the same building where this Rachel person has a registered business address. What kind of business? Offshore financial consulting, the kind of company that specializes in helping people hide money in international accounts. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus hadn't just found a partner for his scheme, he'd found a professional who specialized in exactly this kind of theft. David, I want to know everything about Rachel, her background, her other clients, how she operates. If she's done this before, there might be other victims. Already on it. I'll have a full report by morning. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for war. I gathered every document that proved my separate ownership of assets Marcus had no legal right to touch. I created detailed timelines of his suspicious behavior. I made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different locations. Most importantly, I recorded a detailed video statement explaining everything I'd discovered, to be released to authorities if anything happened to me. Patricia had advised this as a precaution. If Marcus and Rachel were willing to steal millions, they might be willing to escalate their crimes if they felt cornered. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. Marcus, his voice tight with stress. Sienna, I'm having some kind of banking issue. Our joint account is frozen. Did you do something? I kept my voice casual, concerned. What kind of freeze? That's weird. I don't know. I tried to transfer some funds for a client payment and everything's blocked. Can you call the bank? Of course. Maybe it's a security thing? You know how paranoid banks are these days. Yeah, probably. But his voice carried an edge of panic I'd never heard before. I need to stay downtown to sort this out. Might be late again. No problem. I'll handle the bank situation from here. After hanging up, I smiled for the first time in days. Marcus was discovering that his carefully planned theft had just hit an unexpected wall. By now, Rachel was probably getting frantic calls about their timeline being compromised, but they had no idea their real problem wasn't frozen accounts. Their real problem was that they'd tried to steal from a woman whose father had taught her to always keep her enemies closer than her friends. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my home office with multiple phones and laptops, monitoring the digital trap David and I had set. Every attempt Marcus made to access any account was being logged. Every call he placed was being tracked. Every move he and Rachel made was creating evidence we'd use against them. At 11:47 p.m., the first alert came in. Marcus had tried to access our primary joint account 6 times in succession. Then he'd called 3 different banks. Then he'd attempted to log into my business accounts, using passwords that were no longer valid. The beautiful thing about panicked criminals is they stop being careful. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Bank says there's some kind of fraud investigation. They won't give me details. Are you getting the same messages? I waited 20 minutes before responding, making him sweat. No messages here. Maybe call them tomorrow? I'm already asleep. 3 minutes later, another text. This is urgent, Sienna. I need to transfer money for a critical business deal tomorrow. Can you call the bank tonight? The desperation in his messaging was almost satisfying. For months, he'd been calm and collected while planning to destroy my life. Now he was falling apart because his victim had turned out to be more formidable than expected. I turned off my phone and let him panic in silence. The next morning, I met with FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez in a conference room that felt like something from a crime drama. She was younger than I'd expected, but her questions demonstrated the sharp intelligence David had promised. Mrs. Richardson, this is one of the more sophisticated domestic fraud schemes we've seen this year. Your husband and his partner have created what we call a long con. They've been planning this for months, possibly longer. She showed me printouts of financial records I'd never seen before. We've traced the preliminary transfers your husband made. The money didn't disappear. It went into accounts controlled by Rachel Morrison's consulting firm. They were essentially stealing from you in installments, building up capital for their escape plan. How much total are we talking about? So far, approximately $350,000 from your joint accounts. But that was just the appetizer. The main course would have been your inheritance accounts, your business assets, and your property holdings. Agent Martinez pulled out another folder. We've also discovered something interesting about Ms. Morrison. She's done this before. Twice. Both times with married businessmen who had access to their wives' family money. Both previous victims lost everything before they realized what was happening. The systematic nature of it made my skin crawl. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was Rachel's business model. What happened to the other victims? One woman lost $42 million in family assets. The other lost her inherited pharmaceutical company. Both cases resulted in messy divorces and lengthy legal battles, but the stolen money was never recovered. Because it was already hidden offshore? Exactly. By the time they realized they'd been robbed, the money was buried in shell corporations across multiple jurisdictions. Recovering international assets requires years of legal action and massive legal fees, assuming you can even identify where the money went. I thought about how close I'd come to becoming victim number 3. If I hadn't lost my phone, if Tony hadn't been honest enough to show me those messages, I would have been financially destroyed while trusting the man sleeping next to me every night. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Mrs. Richardson, we'd like your help with a controlled operation. Your husband doesn't know we're involved yet. If we can get him to document his plans more completely, we can build an airtight case not just against him, but against Rachel Morrison's entire operation. What kind of operation? We want you to act like you haven't discovered anything. Let him think the account freezes are just temporary banking issues. Give him enough rope to hang himself with. The idea of pretending everything was normal, of letting Marcus touch me and lie to me while I knew exactly what he was planning, made my stomach turn. But the thought of Rachel Morrison finding new victims made me furious. How long would this take? A few days at most. We believe they'll accelerate their timeline now that they've hit account access problems. Panicked criminals make bigger mistakes. I agreed to cooperate. Agent Martinez gave me recording equipment and detailed instructions on how to document conversations without arousing suspicion. When I got home that afternoon, Marcus was pacing in our living room like a caged animal. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Finally, where were you? I've been trying to reach you all day. Shopping with Patricia, then spa appointments. My phone died. I held up the recording device, disguised as a phone charger, and plugged it into the wall outlet near our couch. What's wrong? You look terrible. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. These banking issues are getting worse. I can't access anything. My business partner thinks there might be some kind of federal investigation into international transfers. Federal investigation? That sounds serious. It's probably nothing, but we might need to move some money around temporarily. You know, spread things across different banks until this gets sorted out. There it was. The beginning of his pitch to get me to actively participate in moving assets he planned to steal. What kind of money movement? Marcus sat down next to me, taking my hand like he used to during our dating days. Some of your inheritance accounts, maybe some business funds, just temporarily, until the bank stopped flagging everything as suspicious. I let concern fill my voice. Marcus, that sounds risky. Those are protected accounts my father set up specifically to… I know, baby. But if there really is some kind of investigation, we need to protect your assets from being frozen too. I've been researching asset protection strategies. The lie came so smoothly from his lips. Asset protection strategies. As if he was trying to help me instead of rob me. What do you think I should have said to him in that moment? Drop a comment if you've ever had to pretend everything was normal while someone you trusted was betraying you. I squeezed Marcus's hand and looked into his eyes with all the trust I could fake. You're right, honey. I should probably move everything to safety. Can you help me figure out the best way to protect Dad's legacy? The relief on his face was almost comical. He thought he'd just convinced me to hand over millions willingly. Of course, baby. I've already researched some options. There are these international trust structures that are completely protected from any domestic investigations. Over the next hour, Marcus laid out his entire plan while I recorded every word. He showed me documents Rachel had prepared, explained the timeline for transfers, and even mentioned their planned escape route to the Cayman Islands. The most chilling part wasn't the sophistication of his scheme. It was how naturally he lied to me, how easily he played the concerned husband while describing my financial destruction in detail. The beauty of this structure, he said, pulling up bank documents on his laptop, is that once the money is transferred, even if something goes wrong domestically, our assets are completely protected. Our assets. He was already thinking of my inheritance as his money. When would we need to do this? Tomorrow. The transfer window for these international accounts is pretty narrow, and with all the banking scrutiny happening right now, we can't afford to wait. I nodded thoughtfully. I'll need to call Patricia and have her review everything first. Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Actually, baby, it might be better if we kept this between us for now. Lawyers sometimes overcomplicate these protection strategies. We can loop Patricia in after everything's secured. But she's been handling my family's legal affairs for 15 years, which is exactly why she might be hesitant about new approaches. Sometimes fresh perspective is what you need. Marcus moved closer, his voice taking on the intimate tone he used during our most personal conversations. Trust me, Sienna. I would never let anything happen to what your father built. The irony was breathtaking. He was asking me to trust him while planning the complete destruction of my father's legacy. Okay, I said finally. If you think it's the best way to protect everything, I trust you. Marcus kissed me then, and I had to fight not to recoil. This man who'd shared my bed for 3 years, who knew my body better than anyone, who'd held me through my darkest moments, was betraying me with a thoroughness that took my breath away. That night, Marcus made dinner and opened an expensive bottle of wine, celebrating what he thought was his successful manipulation of his trusting wife. I played my role perfectly, asking technical questions about the transfer process, expressing gratitude for his financial expertise, even toasting to our protected future. Meanwhile, Agent Martinez was receiving real-time recordings of Marcus confessing to international wire fraud with enough detail to ensure conviction. After Marcus fell asleep, I slipped out to email Agent Martinez with additional context about Rachel's documents and the transfer timeline. Her response came back within minutes. Outstanding work. We have everything we need. Operation concludes tomorrow morning. I lay in bed next to my husband, listening to him sleep peacefully while planning my destruction, and realized something profound had shifted inside me. The woman who'd married Marcus 3 years ago, who'd trusted blindly and loved unconditionally, was gone. She'd been murdered by his betrayal, as surely as if he'd put a knife in her heart. The woman lying there now was someone different, someone harder, someone who understood that love without wisdom was just another form of suicide. Tomorrow, Marcus would discover that his trusting wife had turned out to be his most dangerous enemy. But tonight, I let him sleep peacefully for the last time in his life, because tomorrow the FBI would be knocking on our door, and Marcus Richardson's carefully planned future would crumble like a house built on sand. The broken phone he'd abandoned in our drawer had become the instrument of his destruction. Sometimes the things we discard carelessly are exactly what destroy us in the end. What he never understood was that you don't survive in business by trusting people blindly. You survive by trusting yourself enough to verify everything. My father had taught me that lesson at 15. It had taken me 13 years to finally understand what he meant. Tomorrow, Marcus would learn it too. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes Manhattan look like a movie set. I made coffee and watched Marcus get dressed for what he thought would be the biggest payday of his criminal career. Instead, it would be the last morning of his freedom. Big day today, I said, handing him his favorite mug. Huge day. Everything changes after today, baby. He kissed my forehead with the same lips that had been lying to me for months. By tonight, we'll be completely financially protected. If he only knew how protected I was about to become. At exactly 9:15 a.m., while Marcus was supposedly meeting a client downtown, Agent Martinez and 3 other FBI agents knocked on our door. I answered in my silk robe, playing the confused wife perfectly. Mrs. Richardson, FBI. We need to speak with you and your husband about some financial irregularities. Financial irregularities? I don't understand. Is Marcus in some kind of trouble? They showed me their credentials and explained they were investigating international wire fraud. I invited them in, offered coffee, and performed the role of the bewildered spouse who had no idea her husband was a criminal. Where is Mr. Richardson currently? He's meeting with a business partner downtown, something about finalizing a big deal. I gave them Rachel's office address, which I'd memorized from David's research. Agent Martinez exchanged glances with her team. Mrs. Richardson, we're going to need you to contact your husband and ask him to come home immediately. Don't mention that we're here. Just tell him you need him for something urgent. I called Marcus, my voice shaking with just the right amount of worry. Honey, something's happened. I need you to come home right away. What kind of something? I'm in a crucial meeting. I can't explain over the phone. Over. Please, just come home. It's about our accounts. The magic words. Marcus's greed overrode his caution. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While we waited, Agent Martinez explained that they'd already arrested Rachel Morrison at her office. She was currently in FBI custody, and her computers had been seized. The entire offshore scheme was unraveling in real time. What will happen to Marcus? That depends on how cooperative he is. But Mrs. Richardson, given the evidence we have, your husband is looking at serious federal charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy, attempted grand theft. We're talking about potential decades in prison. 23 minutes later, Marcus's key turned in our lock. I heard him calling out as he entered. Sienna? What's the emergency with our... He stopped dead when he saw 4 FBI agents sitting in our living room. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His briefcase, which I knew contained documents for the money transfer, slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Marcus Richardson? Agent Martinez stood up, her voice crisp and professional. Yes? You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, attempted grand theft, and violations of federal banking regulations. You have the right to remain silent. I watched Marcus's legs give out as the Miranda rights were read. He sank into our expensive sofa, the one we'd picked out together during happier times, and stared at me with dawning comprehension. Sienna, how did they? The broken phone, Marcus. I kept my voice gentle, almost pitying. You forgot to delete your text with Rachel before you threw it in the drawer? His face went from pale to gray. You've known? For how long? Long enough to protect everything you tried to steal. Agent Martinez cuffed him while 2 other agents searched our apartment for additional evidence. They found Rachel's transfer documents, offshore account information, and detailed plans for their escape to the Cayman Islands. Mrs. Richardson, Agent Martinez said as they prepared to take Marcus away, you'll need to come in later today to finalize your statement. But I want you to know, your cooperation has helped us shut down an operation that could have victimized dozens of other women. As they led Marcus toward the door, he turned back to me with desperate eyes. Sienna, please. We can work this out. I love you. I was just trying to protect us from what, Marcus? From my success? From my inheritance? From the fact that I was always going to be more successful than you? The truth of it hit him like a slap. His entire scheme hadn't been about protecting anything. It had been about destroying a woman whose achievements made him feel inadequate. I never meant for it to go this far. You meant to steal $43 million and disappear to another country. How much further could it have gone? The FBI agents escorted him out of our building, past the same doorman who'd greeted us as a happy couple for 3 years. I watched from our window as they put him in the back of a federal vehicle, knowing it was the last time I'd see him as anything other than a defendant in a criminal trial. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. You might be surprised by how this story ends. The silence in our penthouse after Marcus's arrest was different from any quiet I'd ever experienced. It wasn't peaceful. It was the hollow echo of a life that had been built on lies finally collapsing into truth. I poured myself a glass of wine at 10 in the morning because some moments require alcohol regardless of social conventions. Then I called Patricia to begin the legal process of divorcing a federal criminal. Sienna, I saw the news alerts. Are you okay? I'm perfect, actually. Can you meet me this afternoon? We need to discuss divorce proceedings and asset protection. Of course. Should I bring my criminal defense contacts? No need. I'm not the one facing federal charges. The satisfaction in my voice must have been obvious, because Patricia chuckled grimly. Remind me never to try to steal from you. By noon, news of Marcus's arrest had hit the financial press. Investment manager arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The article mentioned that his wife, described as a successful businesswoman, had cooperated with federal investigators. My phone started ringing immediately. Board members, employees, clients, all wanting to know if the scandal would affect our company. I spent 2 hours reassuring everyone that my personal situation had zero impact on business operations. The fourth call was from someone I hadn't expected. Sienna, this is David Chen. I just received a strange message that you need to hear about. I nearly dropped the phone. What kind of message? Rachel Morrison's lawyer contacted me. She wants to relay some information to you through legal channels. Something about your husband's laptop containing additional evidence. The audacity was breathtaking through even this indirect method. David, what could she possibly want to tell me? Her lawyer says she claims this wasn't personal, that Marcus approached her, not the other way around. I laughed grimly. David, she runs a company that specializes in helping people steal money from their families. Nothing she does is personal. It's just business. There's more. She says Marcus was obsessed with bringing you down, that he hated your success, and would have found another way, with or without her involvement. Is she trying to make me feel sorry for her? She claims your husband was planning to destroy you long before she came into the picture. Says this goes deeper than money. Something in David's tone made me pay attention. What does she mean? Her message says to check his laptop, the one he keeps in his home office. You'll find files that explain everything. After David hung up, I sat staring at the phone, wondering if this was some kind of manipulation from a desperate criminal, or if Rachel Morrison had just given me one final piece of information that would change everything. Marcus's laptop sat on his desk exactly where he'd left it that morning. I'd never had reason to snoop through his personal files before. Trust? The thing that had nearly destroyed me had also protected him from scrutiny. I tried several obvious passwords. Our anniversary, his birthday, my birthday. Then I tried my father's birthday, the date Marcus had used for other passwords in the past. It worked. I started with his email archives, going back months before Rachel Morrison had entered his life. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails to private investigators, asking about ways to prove I was mentally incompetent to manage my inheritance. Research into having me declared unfit due to emotional instability following my father's death. Consultations with lawyers about challenging my father's will on the grounds that I was too young and inexperienced when it was written. Marcus hadn't just wanted to steal my money. He'd wanted to have me declared legally incompetent so he could control everything as my guardian. But the worst discovery was in a folder labeled insurance policies. Marcus had taken out a life insurance policy on me 6 months ago. $5 million in, with him as the sole beneficiary. The application listed me as having high-stress lifestyle and family history of heart problems, both complete fabrications. I called Agent Martinez immediately. Agent Martinez, I need to report additional evidence in the Marcus Richardson case. What kind of evidence? Evidence that he wasn't just planning to steal from me. He was planning to have me declared incompetent, and possibly worse. The silence on the other end of the line told me she understood the implications. Mrs. Richardson, don't touch anything else on that computer. We're sending a team to collect it immediately. And I'm recommending you consider personal security arrangements until we understand the full scope of your husband's plans. After hanging up, I sat in Marcus's office chair, looking at the computer that had just revealed the true depth of his betrayal. This hadn't been about money. It had been about complete destruction of my independence, my competence, and possibly my life. The man I'd shared my bed with, my dreams with, my body with, had been planning my systematic elimination while kissing me goodnight. Some violations cut so deep they change your DNA. The FBI's computer forensics team spent 4 hours in our apartment, during which I learned details about Marcus's plans that made Rachel Morrison's offshore scheme look amateur by comparison. Agent Martinez laid out the timeline while her technicians worked. Your husband began researching ways to challenge your competency 8 months ago. He consulted with 3 different law firms about the process for having you declared mentally unfit. What was his justification? Grief-related depression following your father's death. Erratic business decisions. Emotional instability affecting your judgment. She paused. None of which matches any documented behavior, according to your medical records and business associates. Because none of it was true. Exactly. But the life insurance policy suggests he had a backup plan if the competency route didn't work. The insurance investigation revealed that Marcus had been researching accidental death scenarios. Slip and fall accidents, car crashes, even home invasions gone wrong. The search history on his computer read like a manual for the perfect murder. We believe he was planning to have you declared incompetent first, Agent Martinez explained. That would give him legal control over your assets. If that failed, the insurance policy provided an alternative path to your wealth. I thought about all the times over the past few months when Marcus had suggested I was working too hard, seemed stressed, might benefit from professional help with my grief. The foundation for his competency case had been laid through months of subtle psychological manipulation. How close was he to filing the competency petition? Based on his correspondence, probably within the next month, he was waiting to accumulate more documentation of your supposed mental state. The calculating patience of it all was what disturbed me most. Marcus had been playing a long game, systematically building a case for my incompetence while I trusted him completely. David Chen arrived that evening with additional financial discoveries. Sienna, we've traced the money Marcus stole over the past year. It's significantly more than we originally thought. How much more? Close to $600,000 total. He'd been siphoning funds since right after your father's funeral, using your grief as cover for taking control of financial decisions. The timeline made me sick. While I'd been mourning my father, trusting Marcus to help manage the practical details of settling the estate, he'd been systematically robbing me. There's something else, David continued. Marcus had been researching your business operations extensively. Client lists, vendor relationships, key employee information. We think he was planning to sabotage the company as part of his competency case. Sabotage how? Create problems that would make you look like an incompetent leader. Lose key clients, make bad financial decisions, generally undermine your professional reputation. I realized that several unusual business problems over the past few months now made sense. Clients who'd suddenly become difficult for no apparent reason. Vendor relationships that had soured mysteriously. Key employees who'd seemed dissatisfied despite having no obvious grievances. Marcus hadn't just been stealing my money. He'd been actively sabotaging my professional life to support his case that I was unfit to manage my inheritance. That night, I sat in my living room with a bottle of wine and Marcus's laptop, reading through the complete documentation of his plan to destroy me. The level of detail was staggering. Psychological profiles explaining how to manipulate someone in grief, legal strategies for challenging inherited wealth, even backup plans involving my potential disappearance. My phone rang the next afternoon. Unknown number. Hello? Sienna, it's Marcus. I'm calling from detention during visiting hours. How did you get phone access? I need to talk to you. There are things you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Marcus. I found your laptop. Silence on the other end of the line. The competency research. The insurance policy. The business sabotage. I understand everything. Sienna, please. You have to believe me. I was desperate. My business was failing, and I couldn't stand watching you succeed while I lost everything. So you decided to destroy me instead of building yourself up. I never meant for it to go so far. The insurance thing, that was just financial protection in case something really did happen to you. People in high-stress careers... Marcus, stop. Just stop lying. You researched accidental death scenarios. You planned my murder. It wasn't supposed to be like that. I just wanted us to be equal. I wanted to matter as much as you did. The pathetic honesty in his voice was almost worse than his lies. Marcus hadn't just been greedy. He'd been eaten alive by jealousy and inadequacy, and he'd chosen to destroy me rather than face his own limitations. You did matter, Marcus. You mattered to me. That's why I trusted you with everything. I know. I threw it all away because I couldn't stand being the lesser partner in our marriage. You were never the lesser partner. You made yourself lesser by choosing to be a thief instead of a man. I hung up and blocked his number. That evening brought news that would change everything one final time. Agent Martinez called early the next morning with an update that made me sit down hard in my kitchen chair. Mrs. Richardson, we've made an additional arrest in your case. Someone you're going to want to hear about. Another partner of Rachel's? No, someone much closer to home. We arrested your accountant, Jennifer Walsh, at her office an hour ago. The name hit me like a physical blow. Jennifer had been managing my personal finances for over 2 years. She'd been recommended by Marcus when my father's longtime accountant retired. I'd trusted her with access to everything. Jennifer was involved in this? More than involved. She was the one who gave Marcus access to your inheritance accounts. The offshore transfers wouldn't have been possible without someone with her level of access to your financial systems. I felt like I was going to be sick. How long has she been working with him? Based on the evidence we've recovered since about 6 months after your father died. She approached Marcus, not the other way around. The timeline made me dizzy. While I'd been grieving, Marcus had been recruited into a conspiracy that had already been targeting me. Mrs. Richardson, there's more. Jennifer Walsh has been systematically embezzling from you for over 2 years. We estimate she's stolen approximately $1.2 million in total. The number was staggering. But what hurt more was the realization that I'd been surrounded by people planning my destruction while I mourned my father and trusted my husband. How is this connected to Rachel Morrison? Jennifer is Rachel's business partner. They've been running this operation for years, targeting wealthy women who inherited family businesses. They identify targets, place someone inside their financial operations, then recruit a romantic partner to help with the psychological manipulation. My legs gave out. I sank to the kitchen floor, phone still pressed to my ear, understanding finally hitting me like a freight train. Marcus wasn't my husband who turned into a criminal. He was a criminal who became my husband. We believe that's correct. Jennifer identified you as a target shortly after your father's death. Marcus was introduced to you at that business conference specifically to begin a romantic relationship that could provide access to your inheritance. The business conference where I'd met Marcus. I'd thought it was fate, the way we'd struck up a conversation at the hotel bar, how perfectly we'd seemed to match each other. But it had been a setup from the beginning. How much of our relationship was real? Agent Martinez's silence answered my question. I sat on my kitchen floor for an hour after hanging up, processing the complete destruction of everything I'd thought I knew about my life for the past 3 years. My marriage had been a business transaction. My husband had been an actor playing a role. My love had been the weapon they'd used to rob me. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began building inside me. Not grief this time. Not betrayal. Fury. Pure, crystalline fury at the elaborate con game that had turned my life into their profit center. David Chen arrived that afternoon with more devastating details. Sienna, we've traced the pattern. Jennifer and Rachel have done this to at least 6 other women over the past decade. You were just their latest target. What happened to the others? 2 lost everything and never recovered. 1 committed suicide after losing her family's restaurant chain. The others are still fighting in courts, trying to recover assets hidden in offshore accounts. I thought about the woman who'd killed herself rather than live with the complete destruction of her family legacy, and my fury crystallized into something harder and more focused. These people hadn't just robbed me. They were professional destroyers of women's lives. David, I want you to contact every one of their previous victims. I want to coordinate our cases and make sure Jennifer, Rachel, and Marcus face charges for everything they've done. That could take years of legal work. I have years, and I have resources they underestimated. That evening, I called Agent Martinez with a proposal. Agent Martinez, I want to help you build the strongest possible case against these people, not just for what they did to me, but for what they've done to other women. What did you have in mind? I want to fund a complete investigation into their operation. Hire forensic accountants, private investigators, whatever it takes to trace every victim and every stolen dollar. Mrs. Richardson, that's going to be expensive. I smiled grimly. They tried to steal $43 million from me. I can afford to spend a few million making sure they never do this to anyone else. That's very generous. But why take on that expense yourself? Because, I said, looking out at the Manhattan skyline from the window of the penthouse Marcus had helped me buy, they made one critical mistake in their calculations. What's that? They assumed I'd be destroyed by discovering their betrayal. Instead, they just made me rich, single, and extremely motivated to see justice done. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person your enemies never thought you could be. 3 weeks later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Marcus, Rachel, and Jennifer face arraignment on charges that could put them away for decades. The investigation I'd funded had uncovered the complete scope of their operation, and the evidence was overwhelming. But the most satisfying moment came when the prosecutor read the additional charges that had been filed based on our expanded investigation. The defendants are also charged with conspiracy, racketeering, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise that defrauded multiple victims across several states over a period of 8 years. I watched Marcus's face as he realized this wasn't just about what he'd done to me. This was about a pattern of calculated destruction that would be prosecuted to the full extent of federal law. Rachel Morrison looked like she wanted to disappear into her orange jumpsuit. Jennifer Walsh was openly crying as the weight of the evidence against her became clear. After the hearing, Agent Martinez found me in the courthouse hallway. Mrs. Richardson, I wanted to thank you personally. Without your resources and determination, we never would have uncovered the full scope of their operation. What's the likely outcome? Based on the evidence and the pattern of repeat offenses, we're looking at significant prison sentences. Marcus is probably facing 15 to 20 years. Rachel and Jennifer could get even longer due to their leadership roles in the conspiracy. Justice felt good, but it wasn't enough. That afternoon, I met with the 6 other women who'd been victimized by the same operation. We gathered in my company's conference room, a group of successful women who'd been targeted specifically because of our achievements. Sarah Chen had lost her family's restaurant empire. Michelle Rodriguez had seen her inherited textile business destroyed. Anna Williams had lost a pharmaceutical company that had been in her family for 3 generations. Ladies, I said, looking around the table at faces that showed the same combination of strength and fury I felt, I have a proposal for you. I laid out my plan. A coordinated civil lawsuit that would go beyond criminal prosecution to ensure complete financial accountability. A victims' rights advocacy group that would help other women recognize and respond to similar schemes. And most importantly, a foundation that would provide resources for women whose family businesses had been destroyed by fraud. The criminal case will put them in prison, I explained, but the civil case will ensure they can never profit from what they stole. We're going to take everything they have and use it to help their victims rebuild. Sarah leaned forward. What about the money they've already hidden offshore? My forensic accountants have traced most of it. The beauty of criminals is that they always think they're smarter than they are. Rachel and Jennifer kept detailed records of every transaction. We know where the money is, and we're going to get it back. Over the next 2 hours, we planned a coordinated legal strategy that would ensure our tormentors faced consequences far beyond anything they'd imagined when they targeted us. But the most important moment came when Michelle asked the question I'd been hoping someone would raise. Sienna, why are you doing all this? You stopped them from stealing from you. You could just move on. I thought about Marcus's laptop, about the insurance policy, about the months of psychological manipulation designed to make me doubt my own competence. Because, I said finally, they didn't just try to steal my money. They tried to steal my sanity, my self-worth, and my life. They made me question everything I knew about trust and love and family. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city where my father had built his empire. But more than that, they're still out there. Even if these 3 go to prison, there are others running similar schemes. Other women are being targeted right now by men who've been trained to exploit their success and their trust. I turned back to face the group. I'm not just seeking justice for what they did to us. I'm preventing what they would have done to their next victims. Anna nodded slowly. It's not about revenge. It's about protection. Exactly. We're going to turn their own success against them. Use their detailed records to expose their methods. Make it impossible for anyone to run this kind of operation again. As the meeting ended and the other women prepared to leave, Sarah stayed behind. Sienna, can I ask you something personal? Of course. How do you trust anyone again after something like this? How do you believe that someone loves you for yourself and not for what they can take from you? I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know that letting their betrayal destroy my capacity for trust would be giving them exactly what they wanted. They tried to make me paranoid and isolated. The best revenge is becoming someone who can love wisely instead of fearfully. Sarah smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Wise love instead of blind trust. Something like that. That night, I sat in my penthouse, Marcus's belongings finally cleared out, the space reclaimed as truly mine, and realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. The woman who'd married Marcus 3 years ago had been confident but naive, successful but trusting to the point of vulnerability. The woman sitting there now was something different. Harder but not bitter. Wiser but not cynical. I'd been forged in the fire of complete betrayal, and emerged as someone I'd never been before. Someone who couldn't be destroyed by other people's greed and jealousy. Someone who understood that real strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from surviving it, and choosing to use that survival to protect others. Tomorrow, the civil lawsuit would be filed. The foundation would be established. The advocacy group would begin helping other women recognize and escape similar schemes. But tonight, I raised a glass of wine to the woman I'd become, and to the father whose legacy had survived every attempt to destroy it. Because sometimes the only way to honor the people who believed in you is to become worthy of their faith, even after they're gone. 6 months later, I stood in the same federal courthouse where Marcus had been sentenced to 18 years in prison. Today, I was there for the final hearing in our civil case, where the judge would rule on asset recovery and restitution. The number he announced made me close my eyes in satisfaction. The court awards the plaintiffs a total of $47.3 million in damages and recovered assets, to be distributed among the victims according to the established formula. It was more than any of us had lost individually, but less than what the criminals had stolen from all their victims combined. Still, It represented justice in a way that felt complete. Rachel Morrison, now facing 22 years in federal prison, would spend the rest of her career criminal life behind bars. Jennifer Walsh had received 15 years and would never work in finance again. And Marcus? Marcus had tried to write me letters from prison. Apologies, explanations, attempts to reframe his betrayal as some kind of misguided love. I'd returned every letter unopened. Some bridges don't deserve to be rebuilt. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse into bright spring sunshine, breathing air that felt different than it had 6 months ago. Cleaner somehow. Less heavy with the weight of deception. Agent Martinez caught up with me on the courthouse steps. "Mrs. Richardson, I wanted you to know that the foundation you established has already helped 12 women recover from similar fraud schemes. The advocacy group has prevented at least 6 other women from becoming victims." Good, that's the point. There's something else. We've received reports of similar operations in 3 other states. Women being targeted through romantic relationships designed to provide access to inherited wealth. Would you be willing to consult on those cases? I'd been expecting this request. The success of our coordinated approach had attracted attention from law enforcement agencies dealing with similar crimes. Send me the case files. If these women want help building their cases the way we did, I'm interested. As Agent Martinez walked away, I realized I'd found something unexpected in the aftermath of Marcus's betrayal. Purpose, a reason to use my resources and experience beyond just building my father's business. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chen. "Lunch to celebrate? I promise not to bring any forensic accounting documents." I smiled and typed back, "Only if you promise to tell me about that vacation you've been planning. Some of us need to remember that life exists outside of legal battles." David had become something I hadn't expected. A real friend who'd proven his loyalty during the worst period of my life. Not romantic, at least not yet, but genuine in a way that felt revolutionary after 3 years of living with an actor. That evening, I hosted a dinner party at my penthouse for the other women from our legal team. We'd become an unlikely family, bonded by shared trauma, but united by our refusal to be defined by what had been done to us. "So," Michelle said, raising her wine glass, "what's next for the victim's rights advocate who took down a criminal empire?" "I've been thinking about expanding the business," I said. "Dad always wanted to open international offices. London, maybe Tokyo." "Running away from the scene of your triumph?" Sarah teased. "More like running toward new challenges. Besides, this kind of fraud isn't limited to the United States. Women all over the world are being targeted by men who see their success as something to exploit." Anna leaned forward, interested. "You mean taking the foundation international?" "I mean building a network. Law enforcement cooperation, victim resources, prevention education, making it harder for people like Marcus and Rachel to operate anywhere." As the evening wound down and my friends prepared to leave, I found myself thinking about the woman I'd been when this all started. Successful but naive, trusting to the point of vulnerability. That woman was gone, but not in the way Marcus had planned. I'd become someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to people who preyed on successful women. My phone rang as I was cleaning up. Unknown number, but something made me answer. "Is this Sienna Richardson?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Catherine Wells. I'm calling from London. Agent Martinez gave me your number. I think I'm being targeted by the same kind of scheme that happened to you." I sat down, suddenly focused. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, I listened to Catherine describe a situation that was eerily familiar. A romantic partner who'd appeared in her life shortly after she'd inherited a family business. Financial advisors who'd been recommended by that partner. Suggestions that she might not be competent to handle her inheritance alone. "Catherine," I said when she finished, "how quickly can you get to New York?" "I can fly out tomorrow." "Why?" "Because we're going to make sure your story has a very different ending than mine almost did." After hanging up, I walked to my window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline, the same view I'd had during some of the darkest moments of my life. But tonight, the lights looked different. Not like a city where I'd been victimized, but like a fortress where I'd learned to fight back. My father had built an empire based on the principle that success requires vigilance, that trust should be earned, not given freely. That strength comes from protecting not just yourself, but others who might be vulnerable. I'd learned those lessons the hard way, through betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. But I'd survived, and more than survived. I'd turned my victimization into a weapon against people who preyed on successful women. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe, because the work of protecting women from these schemes is just beginning. Catherine Wells would be the first of many women who would discover that being targeted by criminals had connected them to a network of survivors who refused to let anyone else fall victim to the same schemes. Some stories end with justice. The best ones end with justice that prevents new victims. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they end with the realization that the worst thing that ever happened to you was actually the beginning of the most important work you'll ever do. Marcus thought he was destroying a trusting woman who'd inherited more than she deserved. Instead, he'd created an enemy who would spend the rest of her life making sure no one like him could succeed again. That's the funny thing about trying to break strong women. You don't break them. You just teach them exactly how strong they really are.